Welcome to SQL Saturday in Dallas. Welcome to Dallas for all our out-of-town guests. How many people do we have from out of town? 1, 2. Where are you from? Tulsa and? Frankston. Okay, all right. East Texas boy.
Yep.
Welcome to Dallas. I'm going to cover loading files without using SSIS. Pretty much what I've had to do is discover ways to load data without SSIS because I came on the scene before SSIS was there. There was BCP, there was DTS, but even before DTS, you had BCP and bulk insert. So, this will be interesting. I'll get to watch. And this will be challenging. Normally, page down will go from slide to slide.
Left mouse button should do it.
I'm sorry?
Left mouse button should do it. There it is.
Okay. Okay, who am I? I'm a developer with over 17 years of experience. I've worked as a consultant. I've worked as within the industry for banking industry. I'm the director of software development for Texans Credit Union. I'm president of Night Owl Development, my own personal company. I don't blog, but I do participate regularly in SQL discussions on SQL Server Central and on Simple Talk. And they wouldn't let me do my preferred bio, which was I thought was basic in and out, which is I code, therefore I am. So Sri said, come up with something else. So the top 4 buttons are just extra. Topics is going to cover a little bit about what my problem is we've got to load files, potential solutions. You can use SSIS, bulk insert, and BCP. This presentation will focus on the last 2. And then you can also do custom solutions. Custom solutions are naturally custom, so I won't address those. Then I want to compare bulk insert and BCP. Then we'll load a few files, produce a few files, and I hope to cover some SQL CLR. Didn't work out and forgot to modify the topic screen. Like I said, basic problem, you've got a bunch of files that you've got to load on a regular or recurring basis. They could come in different file names, so you're going to have to come up with some method of finding those files and loading those files, whether that's through calling a stored procedure, pass in the file name, so on and so forth. They're going to come all different directions from all different kind of vendors. They could be self-generated from your from another core application that you've got, or they could be something sent to you by outside vendors, such as a Notcha file. I'm not certain if you're familiar with, the 94-character Notcha file, very fixed width, very set, very regular. It's very easy to load, but SSIS, I believe, is a better solution for that one because they have master detail, and each row can be a different transaction type. So you can load them very easily using SSIS and bulk insert because they are fixed width, 94 characters. But processing them in a true fashion is probably not the best choice to load them all into a big flat table and then parse through the columns. SSIS, I don't want to go around dissing it. I think it's a wonderful product. It is a Swiss Army knife. It's got everything you could possibly do. You can FTP, you can send mail, you can do all kinds of wonderful things. It will transform and groom your data while it loads it. You can handle all kinds of different master detail situations. It's programmable through VB and C#. You got all kinds of event handlers. You've got and it's endlessly flexible, and it is more complex. What I've got is very old school and very simple. SSIS comes with cost. It's going to consume more resources on your server. Quite often you'll have a separate load server that will host the packages and run those because you don't want to pull down your production database. Therefore, it costs more. It's not a fast, well, it is a fast product, but it's not the fastest product. It consumes lots of resources, and it is very powerful. So let's move on and address some of those lighters. Bulk insert. This one, I think, came about in 2007. I don't think it was available in 6.5. Don't know a whole lot about the pedigree of it, but bulk insert, it's fast, and possibly as fast as SSIS. There are bulk insert tasks within SSIS, but it's also available natively through a stored procedure in SQL Server. It contains a standardized subset of what looks like BCP. It basically looks like a wrapper around some of the BCP calls, and we'll see that here shortly. It is simple, straightforward calling syntax. You can see bulk insert into your table, select your file, then you have a with statement with all these different parameters that you can pass. Cons, you can only load files. It's one direction. It's not variablized. You can't pass in this name of the file as a variable, so that poses a little bit of a problem. You can build dynamic SQL around that to overcome it, but now you've got to worry about, do I set quoted identifiers off so that I can have embedded quotes and treat strings in double quotes versus single quotes? And my favorite, error handling. What error handling? You either load the file or it fails. And I discovered I was getting what I thought were some really good performance metrics. I was like, I'm loading 200,000 records in about 1/10 of a second. Didn't work out that way. I had turned off the error collection, and essentially what I was winding up doing was failing the BCP load, and it was coming back and saying, I failed. I thought, man, this is fast. This is going to go great. Didn't work out that way. BCP, it is the fastest way I've ever found to load files. And there's some things that you can do, some tuning options you can provide that will help to load the files even faster. It has a small memory footprint. BCP, when loaded and running, takes about 5 meg of memory. I remember somewhere reading that SSIS took 20 to 25 meg of memory, and then the necessary stuff for processing the queries itself. Plus, you have to load the .NET framework. There's all kinds of extra garbage you have to do with SSIS. It shares some of the items with bulk insert, but BCP is bidirectional. You can export data by using outputting from a table or a query. You can output from a select statement, just select columns from this, where criteria, order by, and off you go to the races. And one thing a lot of people do not know is you can actually execute a stored procedure on SSI through BCP and have that be your output driver. The cons, it requires XP command shell. It's obtuse and case-sensitive calling syntax. There's a lowercase e and an uppercase e, and they mean different things. And once again, error handling. What error handling? If you're not capturing the results from the output command, you won't know whether you succeeded or failed unless you go look at the table. So that means you have to know something about what you were trying to do before you ever tried to do it. So when we look at the calling syntax for bulk insert and BCP, we'll see that they both have the database name, the schema, the table name or view. In BCP, once again, the whole database, schema, table, view, and or you can do a procedure or query. Direction on bulk insert is only in. With BCP, you're going to get directions of in, out, query out, and format. Format really doesn't do very much for you, except it will provide a nice little utility that helps the BCP perform fast, and that's using a format file. Format files are a little bit obtuse and tough to configure, but once you figure out how to build one, then it becomes falling off the log, and you'll say, why haven't I been doing this all along? And in fact, using format files to load the exact same data can be faster with a format file than without. You got your batch size. You got the from, which is the file spec in BCP. You've got the file spec for bulk insert. You've got your batch size. That's going to tell you how many rows you want to commit once you start running the command. Then you've got your code page. You got different code pages that you can see, or you can specify your own. Here in bulk insert, you treat it as a string, and BCP, you just treat it as a number. You got your data file type. This is one of the places where I think BCP bulk insert has it over BCP. You kind of get the impression from reading the online documentation that you can do -c-n. Not so. These are mutually exclusive. In the data file with bulk insert, at least you get that idea, oh, I've got to pick one. You get your field terminator. It assumes that it's going to be a / new line. But if you've got different ones, you can do, field terminator, I'm sorry. Field terminator, you have to specify one with bulk insert. It assumes a tab as on it for BCP. You can skip over a certain number of rows. You can provide a format file. Format files, like I said, are very helpful. They help to optimize how the load engine actually loads the file. Error file is what you would, an error file is what you would use when you want to pipe the output from the command to a file. And that way you can turn around and load that file and inspect the output. Find out how many records you loaded, how long it took, whether or not there were any errors. Continuing on, you can keep identity columns. Once again, you've got your E. And if I go back, let's see. So here you've got a lowercase e for your error file spec. And here you got an uppercase E for keeping identities. Like I said, this is where bulk insert, I think, has it, because you say keep identities, and you got to, it just makes more sense. Error file and keep it identities versus uppercase E and lowercase e. Keep nulls, last row. If you happen to know how many rows you're going to be loading, that can also help, because there's a little bit of overhead in figuring out when did I reach the end of the file. Row terminator, you have to specify it. BCP will assume a new line. Format file, I repeat myself. It, like I said, helps the processing engine discover how quickly it can, what the order of the columns are, what their data types are. Then you get order. You'd want to do that for outputs. Well, no, you'd want to do that for inputs. Okay. So the order will help to allow you to arrange the data as it comes in flight. In BCP, it winds up being a hint. Anytime you'll see the hint multiple times here. All of these are hints that you can pass in. They belong in a string, and you'll have to separate them by a column. So that's one of the things not real clear in the documentation. -H, open parenthesis, open quotes. Put your order by, your rows per batch, your check constraints, your fire triggers, your tab blocks, so your kilobytes per batch, and then you close your quotes. But you'd have to separate each one of these commands. Here they operate in bulk insert. They operate as completely separate parameters. Next. Okay. With BCP, you're going to get some additional switches. -X. -X will allow you to generate, when it's used with a format command, will allow you to generate an XML format. I don't know, this could be something that came out in BCP 9. I've got BCP 8 loaded on my box. I think that comes stock with 2008. I think 9 is part of either a service pack or part of 2008. With BCP, you can go back to a prior version. You'll be performing the bulk copy operation using data types from an earlier version of SQL Server. So if you're supporting some kind of a legacy application, that can help out. The -6 will do it with the 6.5 data types. -Q will allow you to set your quoted identifiers on. I is for the input file spec. So if you were doing something in an interactive mode, the input file would contain the values that you want to feed in for the prompts. The output file spec is really the name of the file that receives the output redirected from the command prompt. I don't know exactly how I believe the difference between the output and the error is if an error occurs, it puts it in the error file. Otherwise, it just puts, that I've loaded 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 rows. The dash A will specify the number of bytes per network packet. This is where you get into 4096 for a 32-bit system. You could go 8092, I believe it is, for 64, or if you have a different packet size that you want to use. The next two for BCP are natively present in bulk insert. You're already connected to the database in order to do the bulk insert, so you don't have to ask how to connect. With BCP, you're going to have to tell it what the server name and the instance name is. If you're on a server with multiple instances, that'll be required. If you're working with trusted connection, you can just pass the T. Otherwise, you'll have to pass the username and password. So you get to pick your poison. You can either do trusted or native SQL. Dash B will report back the version of the BCP utility, and dash R specifies that regional date and currency formats will be kept. What you can do with a format file, and this is why they're so powerful, is you can receive data from a source feed that doesn't match the layout of your table. Let's say the file has more fields than you want, or there's just some general mismatch. The files coming in from in your feed could be ordered the file will always be ordered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so forth. The table columns can be in any order you want. You could also have more fields that you want in your source file and map them to, or what you wind up doing is mapping them to column 0 in your table. Basically, I don't care where this one goes. You can also have a table that has more columns than fields in the table. Once again, you create dummy file records that will map over to those. So basically, you'd have a 0 file feed going into column 0 so that you don't wind up with a mismatch between your tables and your files. That's really what it comes down to. It's mapping logic that allows you to take different number of columns, different number of fields, different number of columns, and take the two and match them up where they do match, and leave them alone where they don't match. When you get to a format file, and this is one of the reasons I used to hate BCP, is that I'd get these text qualified CSVs, and the question is always, okay, I get a field terminator in BCP, and it tells me that it's going to be a comma. Well, that's true because that does separate the columns, but I want to get rid of the quotes. So all you really have to do is say, take what your beginning is, it's the double quote. Oops. Previous. Okay. You can see there, this string is going to start off with hello, with a double quote for hello world. Then what separates the next field is a quote and a comma. You can then have a comma that separates the 1, 2, 3 from the 4, 5, 6. Then you have a comma and a quote that starts the next one. Nice to see you. You can have now embedded quotes or commas in there. Close out your string with a quote, comma, quote. So really, these are the only type. There are only these 5 delimiters: the quote and the comma and the quote, or the comma and the quote, comma, quote. So if you turn that into a format file, they come in all as SQL car, prefix length. I don't know what that is. Quite honestly, it's there. I've read it. It makes no sense to me. The length is actually the length of the column that you're going to do, or the length of the data that you're going to be loading. You select what your terminator is. You have to escape the double quote, so there's the double quote, goes into a junk column. Then I escape the quote and the comma, so there I am, the quote and the comma. And that will begin that will be how company name ends. Because I've already started my first column saying a delimiter is a quote. I'm not going to load it. Then I'm going to end it with a quote and a comma. So I know that that's the company name. Then I know that, in this case, I'm calling it the company ID and the sales agent ID are separated by a comma. So the company ID ends with a comma, whereas the sales agent ID ends with a comma and a double quote. Turn around for the company motto. It ends in a quote, separated by a comma, and the next field starts with a quote. So basically what you're doing is taking the sales agent ID for the next column in and tell me how it ends, and then how the next field begins. So by the time you get down to the end, there's the hidden carriage return line feed, unless you've got a different one. I think /s would be like a form feed, which is another common delimiter I've seen. So there's your quote, there's your new line, or return a new line. That's the map out what they go into in the table. You got your coalition, so whatever it is what you want for any kind of a numeric data type or non-numeric data type. So dates you don't need, but go ahead and put in the double quotes just because it helps things line up when you go into the format file. We'll see a little bit more of that in the demos. And here we are at the demos. So, okay. Just so you know, all of this is driven out of a demo data set I've made up. It's 250,000 names, addresses, city, state, zip. It's not real fancy. I've got a simple row number, first name, customer since, which is basically a date, address 1, address 2, city, state, zip, and country code. So what I'll do is I've got a couple of views here that will make up text qualified comma separated values. There's not a whole lot to it. It basically takes every string. Oh, dang, I hate that view. As you can see, all I'm doing is prepending some quotes around a value. Close. This one will generate a fixed width. So all I did is cast everything over to varchar 50, varchar 10, varchar 2. Use that to generate a fixed width file. And then a fixed big, which is basically the fix times 4. I generated a 1,000,000 record data set, and we'll load 1,000,000 records today. Got a couple of store procedures here. This one I'll use we'll build a demo for that. What it does is it puts out a data set, you pass in a parameter. This is a simple little store procedure I wrote that will go through and disable indexes. I've always heard that it's a good idea to disable any indexes if you're going to be loading a lot of data, and then rebuild those indexes once they're done. So this store procedure, it's a very simple little one. All it does is it reads, and it will allow me to truncate the table if I want. So I take the object ID, get that for the table name. If I get an object ID and I'm supposed to truncate it, then I just truncate whatever my table name is. Then I build a command to disable all what I'll call regular indexes. If you disable the clustered index on a table, you can't load anything into it. So it's not a good idea to do that. So it's just a select statement from the SSIS indexes. You're going to alter the index, set it to disabled. And I build that out as a single string. Come down here. The length of that command is greater than an arbitrary number, 10. Then I know I've got something. I go ahead and execute that command, return whatever my errors are. Then I've got this handy dandy little thing. I will post this. It is a little utility that will allow me to pass in a string. If I change out the values or have the column names, I can then build a format file that will go for that. If I pass in the table that I'm supposed to load it into, it'll do the matching for me. So I mainly built it for the text qualified CSVs, and like I said, I'll share that with you. But I'll show you also how you can use SQL Server to generate the format file for you. How am I doing on time? Got about half hour? That's about right. Okay, so let's drop on over. I have a mouse control problem. Drop on over. We'll prepare some data. Like I said, XP command shell is your friend. You have to have it enabled in order to run BCP from within SQL Server. And the command, like I said, very simple. Just by habit, I like to use lowercase. I think it's more readable. Also, by habit, it doesn't matter whether I don't have embedded spaces or not. You might want to use quoted names, but I always surround it in double quotes just to make certain that it gets handed off to BCP as a string. You got your direction, in, out, query out, and format. So most of this is just going to be generating the output. This one will generate a simple, notice I'm not specifying the row and field delimiter, therefore it'll generate a tab separated value. But because I'm using the fixed width query, it will generate a field with no tabs and just a carriage return line feed. Pass in character data type, I'm using trusted connection, and there's my server name. This handy little switch for no output will just suppress the data coming back to you. So, without further ado, one other thing I want to show you on the data. Nothing up my sleeve here. That's where all the files will go. When we're done, we will see exactly how it works. And just for the sake of arguments, I'll go ahead and execute this one. And you can see it's spinning up. It'll report back how many rows you got. This is how you know it's. This is how you'll know it's done. It tells you how many rows it exported, network packet size. I also tell you how long on the clock. This is processor time on the clock it took, 4.2 seconds. So when you flip over, there you go. Nice little 69 megabyte file. So we don't have to look at that when we're generating a larger file. So I don't type over stuff. We'll go ahead, execute. This will generate 1,000,000 rows. So, like I said, the fixed width view, all it is just a simple way of saying, I'm going to generate these in fixed positions. I've got another one that comes along. It will do a BCP of the that's not right. Shoot. Global search and replace can be dangerous. So I hope that doesn't blow up anything else. Okay, so basically all I'm going to do is output the content of my demo data directly to this is supposed to be my CSV file. Global search and replace is biting me right here. So this is my CSV file. And so there we go, a nice little text qualified CSV. We'll do a nice little tab delimited file. And then we'll go ahead and do a fun one, just for the sake of arguments. What I'm going to do is with the query out, I'm going to generate an XML file. Just select star from my demo data for XML auto, give it a root name of customers, query out, and there we go to the XML file. And while that's building, go take a look at the data. So now we've got a fixed width file, a fixed big, CSV, tab, and XML. Not too shabby on the size. They're smallish by what I'm used to, but for demo purposes, I think they're adequate. Then you want to generate some format files. This is where having the demo data in a format file, you don't have a file. You would think that you would want to use the file name in place of the destination file, but really what you need to do is pass the format file that you want. So I've just got 3 of them: CSV, fix, and DAT. So I'll just go ahead and generate those. And so data here, we go look at my format files. We'll do a look at the CSV one. Let's take a look at the format. And I think I double clicked. All right. Text pad. So this is the basic layout of a format file. You have the version of BCP it's going to use, the number of rows that it contains. I guess that just acts as a hint so it'll know to quit when it gets to 10. There's the ordinal position of the columns within the table. It sees them as SQL car. Had I decided to pass a different format style, I could have done -n and it would have been SQL in car. This is that prefix length. Once again, still don't know what it is, but 0 always seems to work. Now, I'll have to make a little mod here because it's actually 10 characters, and this field is the customer sense, which is customer sense. I know this one to be 10. That's right. I did a standard month, day, century, and year for the date. All the rest of these should be fine. And so I've said that my delimiter is a tab, which will not work. It sees it, it builds it for me. I remove the tabs, keep the double quotes. Go ahead and keep the new line and save that. Now we've got a nice little format file that will actually go out and build little format file that will go out and build or load that file. Go ahead and look at the CSV. Since all of these were used the same way, I was just using them to build a shell. This is so much easier when you have all the screen real estate. CSV. So I'm going to open that with TextPad. You can see once again it built out the exact same file. I'm going to use that utility I told you about to actually build my CSV. Alright, so just so we'll know, build the target and load tables. We're going to basically build my load data table based on whatever the shape of my demo data table is. And I'll add a primary key to it. Believe it or not, adding a primary key actually helps it run faster. And then we're going to go ahead and build out an XML table also. So it's not very complicated. It's just XML test, XML data column as XML. And we'll talk about those in a minute. It's cute. And away we go. So we're going to talk about basically loading the tab separated file. And so you got the load data. We're going to remove whatever's there. We're going to set a marker as to what time we start. We're going to run bulk insert. There's my tab file. Row terminator, field terminator, tab lock. Tab lock gets into some of the optimization you can do. You can set batch size and all these other wonderful things that'll help load it faster. we'll select the date difference milliseconds, and we'll put that out as the total time. Then just to see that it didn't fail, we'll go ahead and take the top 10 rows from the load data, and we'll count how many rows we actually did load. And hocus pocus, let's see if it works. Should come back in about 5.4 seconds, which would equate to the processor time, or roughly equate to the processor time. There's some overhead built in getting the date and doing the math and all that other fun stuff. Unfortunately, Joe isn't here. I kept this null in here because I know he loves nulls so much. Okay, so that's bulk insert, and what did we do? We said we kept that. Was it 5 seconds? So let's see if bulk insert can do any better. Same basic idea. Set your marker, run the command, then measure the outputs. .8 seconds. Well, I thought BCP was supposed to be faster. Answer: bulk insert is optimized. It will run a lot better. Notice this is also without a format file. It's just simply loading the table. I tried to keep this as comparable as possible. Got the same command. I've got a tab lock. I'm doing character data. BCP does tab and new line as default delimiters, so didn't have to specify those. So let's see about doing this with a format file. So there's my format file. Same methodology, truncate the table, then reload it. Do we do any better than 5 seconds? The answer is slightly better, 4 seconds. Same exercise, this time once again, working with the tab delimited format file. Okay, shaved a second off on both of them. So if we go back and look, the tab delimited files were probably the smallest, 20 meg. So loading 20 meg in 7 seconds, not bad. Loading it in 4 seconds, even better. The advantage looks like it goes to BCP, or goes to bulk insert. Let's try it once again with the fixed width file. Here we got the fixed width format. How do we do on that? Does the format of the file or the size of the file make any difference? If I'd have been smart and thinking about it, I would have piped in all of this into a table so that we could take a look at the final results. Well, chalk that up to experience. On the BCP, so what, we've got 13 seconds to load up 250,000 rows. Not stinking, and I would say that's probably a little bit better than what you're going to get out of SSIS. I wanted to get SSIS working on this, but lack of time. Turn around on BCP. Once again, we're loading about a 70 meg file, 69 meg I think it was. What do we got? The fixed width, yep, 69 meg. Respectable size, 4 seconds. I got closer. Do we have the dreaded text qualified CSV? This is the one, this is the utility I was telling you about. Got this, you pass in the name of the columns, in the order and with the correct delimiters. Notice we didn't have, when I showed you the view, the customer sense date did not have any qualifiers around it. And the post, was it the postcode? State code. State code did not have any text qualifiers around it. So we should be able to just generate this, and this is where my handy dandy little utility comes in. A format file can actually be either a tab delimited file, or it can use a fixed width file. So when I wrote this, I gave you the opportunity to do either a tab delimited or fixed width. So I'm going to take the fixed width one just because it's easier to read. I'm going to overwrite this. Notice we've got 10 rows. Now we've got 11. The reason is we're going to skip this first one, and this is where I told you could have a mismatch between the number of fields in the table and the number of columns that you're actually going to load. After this, it's just simple straight mapping. Had the row number been the very last one, I could just take this 1, shift it down here, put the 10 up here, off we go to the races. So I'll go ahead and save this. One thing that's bitten me a couple of times is I'll have a format file open because I'm trying to work through some kind of a formatting thing. If you try and run BCP while you have the format file or the source file open, it won't allow you to. It'll throw errors on you and you're going like, what's wrong? The answer is you got the format file open. So let's go ahead and try it. Bulk insert. This time we're going to do the CSV. Same basic idea. Could not read. CSV format, CSV data. And the presentation guides didn't like that. So we've got CSV data, text pad. Looks hunky-dory to me. Files. I know what it is. Okay. And it bit me, so that's good that you get to see what happens. Notice I don't have a line 14 here after my last column. You got to end that with the carriage return line feed. Otherwise, the format file will bomb on you. Like I said, you'll sit there scratching your head wondering, what the heck went wrong? Yes, I want to save that. We'll go back over to the SQL. We'll try this again. And it should work. And away we go to the races. 4.4 seconds. Maybe that table's just getting used to being loaded.
It's in cache.
Is it? Well, the data's being truncated. What happens with truncated data? Does it go to Ether or does it go to the transaction log? I don't know. Let's go up. Let's just get rid of the table. Makes no difference to me. Do we think we're cached now? See if we get a different result. We're going to do the dreaded text qualified. Truncate the table. Really no need since there's nothing in it. .6. I'd say that's fairly decent. Shall we try it with BCP? Same file. BCP seems to be losing the race. And so this one, much to my chagrin, has been my conclusion. Bulk insert is highly optimized and will load files faster than BCP. However, bulk insert does not provide you a way to output data. And so if you've got one tool that you really want to use, BCP is not a bad way to go, but bulk insert will outperform it. So what happens if I've got to if I've got some indexes? So notice that all we had was a primary key. Now we're going to put some indexes on it just to sample load. We got the customer name, the date they joined, date they became a customer, the state code, city code, postcode, country code. I don't like waiting while it builds, so I'll go ahead and execute that. Now we've got a bunch of indexes. Let's try BCPing if we've got indexes in place. This is the one that really surprised me the most. Truncate and load. It's rebuilding indexes on the fly as it loads. So we're going from roughly 4 seconds to 17 seconds. So what happens if I try and disable the indexes while I'm loading? So that runs that little table index disabler. We've got to rebuild the indexes, so I don't want to count the load time against it, but the total time should be comparable if I disable and rebuild the indexes. So it's 17 seconds. See what we come up with this time. So it took 6.83 to load it, but 13.24. So what conclusion can you draw from this? Well, one of them would be is your mileage will vary. This is all running on a laptop. It's one hard drive, one controller, test, test, test. The other thing is disabling the indexes does seem to have some kind of a benefit to the load time and to the total time on the throughput. I could run this one, and we probably have time. It takes about a minute and a half. Now, if y'all want to sit here and watch the screen, do nothing for a minute and a half, and ask some questions, that would be fine. If not, we can just move on to the next one, which is kind of cool. Which would you prefer? Load? Next one. All right. Say, what about XML? Okay. You can load XML files, but there's certain problems I've discovered. Let's go ahead and execute this one and watch it go. Yeah. Our XML parsing, line 1, character 2033, unexpected end of input. So what in the heck does that mean? So let's go back to the data. There's my XML file. It's only 45 meg. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. This time I'm going to do it in Ultra Edit because Ultra Edit does something I haven't been able to figure out how to do in TextPad. Notice all these different line numbers. That is your problem. When you export XML, it gives you a carriage return line feed. So you've got broken XML. Now what you could do is go and figure out where all of the customers begin and prettify the XML. That's not advisable because you'll have to undo it if you want to import it. So what I do is I replace my carriage return line feed with nothing. Turns through it. We're working. All right, I close that. Now I've got one row. But if I want to load this as XML, I have to go all the way to the end. And your file has to have a delimiter. So I don't know if you can see it. We're all the way down here at the bottom. And what I'm going to do is give it a carriage return line feed. Get in the right place and give it a carriage return line feed. And now I should be able to save the entire file. Close it. Creates a backup for me. Isn't that nice of them? And now let's try it. Same query. This time I'm loading the XML data. Running it off using bulk insert. 11.8 seconds. And this is where the fun part is, because now it's got to drag that whole 45 meg of data back and display it as an XML file. I've got exactly one row. So I loaded 250,000 rows of XML data into one XML column. So that has been my one weird part that I would say is you cannot, you can work within the limitations of it. There can only be one carriage return line feed in the file. It can't be prettified in any way. It can't be formatted. Otherwise loading into XML, it understands that it is XML data, and therefore it's expecting a parent and a root node. And if you don't have the root node, it's going to see that. So if you've got carriage return line feeds embedded in it to prettify it and separate each one of those 250,000 rows, it will fail on all of them and try and do it 250,000 times. So it would give you the indication that you could click on this and view it. It doesn't. Too much data. But if you're receiving XML files that are coming from some kind of a source system that probably doesn't have any kind of formatting built into it, it's just piping the stuff out as a string, you can probably load those. If not, and that process happens to be under your control, then you can go ahead and remove those, the prettification, if you will. You can add a carriage return line feed, pop those files out, ship them over to someplace, load them up in BCP with BCP or bulk insert, and now you've got a slick way of loading XML files. There's probably a way you can wrap a format file around that. I haven't figured it out yet. Time ran out before for the presentation before I could figure that one out. So really, that I would say is the nub of my presentation. What it really has been an eye-opener for me by doing this presentation is that bulk insert is really faster than BCP. But there are some advantages to BCP, such as you can export data. Oh, I remember one of the things I was going to do. I'm going to show you how you can actually export data with a stored procedure. So, without further ado, we'll go back here, look at programmability, we'll pull up my stored procedure. Like I said, it's a real fancy one. All it does, select all the columns from my demo data where a state code happens to equal something. Probably something you could do within a query. Yes, go ahead.
You got 5 minutes.
Okay. Oh, all right. Something you could probably do easily within just a simple query with a where clause. But one of the things that you can do is extract data into a temp table, massage it, move it around, do all kinds of other stuff that would be very difficult within a simple query. You can then pipe it out in your stored procedure, and now you've got a little bit of power. You can say, here, execute this stored procedure. The limitation would be that it can only have one final output result, and the result set, even if you're saying, excuse me, conditionally, I want to return 7 columns here, but if it meets this other criteria, I only want to return 5 columns. You probably want to stay away from those situations. As long as it returns a consistent record set, it'll be fine with it. So there's my store procedure. Copy, close, go over to here, and we'll say yep, okay. Sorry, this is so awkward. You cannot pass the parameters by name. So just because I know there's not that many of them, we'll take the folks that live in California, the other California. All right, BCP, you'll have to pass an execute statement. EXEC. Okay. You'll change your direction from in to query out. We'll say that it's going to go to state.dat. Okay. Once again, nothing up my sleeve. Control E. Dash H. Can't lock a stored procedure when you're trying to export. So if I remove this query hint for tab locks, and off we go to the races. Did 1,000 rows, 2,361 rows, took about 70 milliseconds. We go and look at our data, and there's state.dat. And because I didn't specify any delimiters or anything else like that, it came out in tab delimited format. Standard. This is the standard native values you would receive, and it looks like I have a null in my data. Always interesting to explore text files. So that's pretty much the presentation, and I'm available to answer any of your questions. Yes, ma'am?
Can you make a format file for the export?
You probably can. I've generally not seen format files used with export. It's generally the formatting is going to occur through whatever. But I don't know. Let's give it a try, shall we? Let's see if we can do a text qualified. That's fixed width. Let's see if we can do that. There's the format file. See what it does. Query out. There's my destination. We'll paste it in right there. Nope. Something about that didn't correspond to what it wanted. Even though I'm doing exactly the same output, it just didn't take it. Any other questions? I guess in conclusion, what I would say is there are more ways to get data into and out of SQL Server than just SSIS. Shown you two that I think that as a DBA, it's always good to know more tools than fewer. BCP, bulk insert are two that you really should consider putting in your tool belt. Thank you.